Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be in this glorious universe we call existence. Welcome back to Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. I'm Brandon James Sim, your co-host. This is Chris Noble, your host and content creator. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Excited to talk about this moon of ours today.
Ooh, the moon. And what fathom of the moon are you looking to discuss today?
A whole bunch of weird stuff, man. The anomalies around this crazy moon of ours. Really interesting moon, beautiful moon, but has a lot more questions and mysteries than answers. So we're going to dive into that today.
So, the moon. We're talking about the moon. I'm sure you're gonna hear probably was it artificial is probably going to be one of the big things that come up. And that's one of the things we keep hearing. But regardless of whether it's artificial or not, Chris, I am fascinated by our moon. And there's some certain anomalies that seem to pop up that we as earthlings, we take it for granted. And that our Earth is our moon and Earth relationship is quite special as far as the cosmic relationships go in the universe. So, do you want to maybe take us through a couple of the talking points that are some of the more mainstream anomalies that present itself to our moon?
Yeah, this is great. There's so many things, and a lot of these are mainstream, and we just kind of don't quite put the pieces together of how incredibly these things are. I think the first, for me, big example is eclipses, the phenomenon of eclipses. So we got to think about this. So when the moon is in between the sun and the earth, right? So let's say we're on earth, of course, we're looking out at an eclipse. That means we're looking at the moon that is in front of the sun, and the mathematical probability of our moon being the exact same size as our sun in terms of its perspective on our planet. So when we're looking out off of planet Earth, we're looking at the moon and it's now in front of the sun, causing an eclipse. The fact that that moon of ours goes in front of that sun and it is the exact same size of our sun, exactly to the kilometer, to the meter, in a way it's the exact same size as our sun in perspective to us on planet Earth. Just the math alone of that happening naturally in our universe, from the mainstream theory, which we only have theories as to how the moon got here. There's still theories. The most commonly acknowledged theory is that another planet of some sort collided with ours millions, billions of years ago, and the residue of that created a smaller body of mass, and then that slowly got through gravity got compressed and pushed together and became our moon, just like our planet as well. So that's why we do find isotopes that are also on Earth on the moon. So the moon isn't completely isolated from our planet. It does have properties that we have on Earth on the moon. However, it gets really weird when we get into the math. So eclipses are one of many,
So
many
hold on, let's
examples.
just let's just talk about this eclipse thing for a second. So you're saying that something that we take for granted, which we all know eclipses are the sacred ancient phenomena that we we mark it in our calendars. It's not like when there's
It's a
eclipse going on, you don't just shrug your shoulders and say, "Oh well, maybe some of us do. I got to go to work. Bye-bye." We don't take the time to give respect to it, I guess, but you're saying that it's a miracle that this moon is the same perspective in size, because we're not talking about the lunar eclipses where a massive body like the earth, which is much bigger than the moon, gets in the way of the sun, casting a shadow. You're talking about the moon basically locking in right over top of that sun to the point where all that exists is a slight halo around it. So if I was on Mars, one of the moons wouldn't obviously do that. I hear a lot of the other moons in the solar system aren't even round, um, as round as ours. That I think of like Phobos and a few of the Russian, or sorry, Russian moons, the Mars moons there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, they're almost shaped like potatoes and stuff a lot of the times. So quite interesting. Yeah. So if you look at that, I mean, it almost looks like the start of a Lord of the Rings movie. It's
Yeah.
so perfect.
It's exactly perfect. That's the thing. And we're gonna watch some clips, very short clips, because we're taking them from History Channel here on YouTube. But I think that we're in the guidelines here for copyright and all that. And all we're doing is just going to show you guys a couple of clips from these episodes where they talk. They have other scientists, of course, interviewed, like Dr. John Brandenburg, really amazing nuclear physicist that's done some great work on Mars. That's a whole other conversation there. But he does talk about some of the mathematical anomalies, like the eclipse. Um, and also the way that the moon came, the more mainstream theory of how the moon came together. But he and another gentleman also remarks on that show. I don't think we'll have time to show this part, but he remarks that the it we're talking, it is so perfect of the size of an eclipse. If it's 1 kilometer off, or one, we're talking about the radius of the moon, if it's 1 kilometer bigger or 1 kilometer smaller, it would not look like what we're seeing right now in these photos here of your classic solar eclipse. It would not, it would just simply not look like that. It would have more light spilling out of it, or it would have far less light, and it would be completely blocked if it was a bit bigger, if the moon was a bit bigger. So it has to be perfectly this size to create the effect that we have as an eclipse.
That's really, really cool, Chris. I was always interested too, and something that I was always wondering about was the rotation of the moon and the fact that it's in what they call, I think, tidal lock, or
Yeah.
um, it's locked into position with our Earth, and that's not common. Again, I think there are other instances of it happening in the universe, but maybe even the solar system. But once again, if we think there are, say there's 100 moons in our solar system, we are in the very small percentile of locked moons where it does not rotate, which is always suspicious because everything seems to be spinning out there. So
Yeah, and so it's not just a weird kind of rotation around our planet. And you're right. I believe there are at least one or two other moons that do have a bit of a tidal lock, but their orbit is different, and so the orbit around Earth is almost perfectly circular, and that's very uncommon. If not, I don't believe it exists at all for other moons. It's always more elliptical, like a football shape around the planet, and our moon is almost the exact same. And this is one of the main reasons why this is the case. And I'm not going to say this is why this is, but this is one of the main, hugely important functions of our moon. I want to make a quick, when I've told a lot of friends of mine theories about the artificial moon, and a lot of my friends are more in the spiritual yogi, meditation type of realms. They don't like hearing this because the moon is very sacred, and the moon's very sacred in many, many, many cultures, of which we all know. That's obvious. We all know this. And like you said, eclipse is something that a lot of people, we get excited about. We still to this day will go out and try to, maybe not look directly at it, but certainly try to get a glimpse of it. And many tribes, as we know, many civilizations put so much importance building temples, literally called the Temple of the Moon, Temple of the Sun, and the moon is very, very important. So I'm not downplaying its importance. Actually, if anything, it's if anything, we're going to show how much more significant the moon is. And one of the main functions that we all know about are the seasons and the tides. And if the moon had a more elliptical orbit, not circular orbit, it would drastically change our seasons and our tides and the water levels on this planet astronomically. So much so that it might not allow us to have a very habitable surface. And so you start to ask these questions, which we'll get into a little bit later in the show. If this is an artificial moon, why was it created? And we can look at what would our planet be like without our moon. And I have some articles I pulled up as well about this, which I'll actually just go a little out of order here and pull those back up, because it is interesting to consider. If we, this is not it here. Let's see, 2 moons. No, we want, what if we had no moon? So one of the big things that I just pulled up an article here on howstuffworks.com, and you can search all this kind of stuff anywhere on the online. This is all mainstream knowledge here. Um, One of the biggest things is that it's going to affect our tidal changes. So if we don't have a moon orbiting, we all of a sudden don't have tides. Water gets all crazy and out of whack. Flooding will occur, massive flooding. It also creates a real disconnect with our seasons. Basically, we'll lose all of the seasons that we have on this planet. And really, what it comes down to is it also messes up our axis. So this is the crazy thing too, is that our planet spins on an axis. I forget the specific degree in which we're orbiting. So we're not straight and then orbiting in a perfect circular way. We're tilted on an axis and then we're rotating that way. And that tilt creates a wobble on this planet. And that wobble is what creates the precession of the equinoxes. This is where we talk about this 26,000 year cycle of consciousness. The Indians would call it the Veda, sorry, in the ancient Vedas, they would call it the Yuga cycle. Plato calls it the Great Year. This is when we're talking about different stages in civilization that the ancients knew about, which they would call the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. Okay, these are the same things that you'll see in the Yuga cycles, and these have to do with levels of human consciousness. And what I'm getting at with this is that I'm not going to talk about the Yugas. That's a whole other video in of itself. But these Yuga cycles are completely dictated by this wobble on the Earth. This 26,000 year cycle is not coincidentally is exactly the 26,000 year roughly cycle is roughly, I think, 25,000 something years. That's in debate, but it's basically roughly around 26,000 years. And that is the amount of time it takes for the Earth to do a full rotation on its wobbling axis. So for it to do a full rotation on this axis takes about 26,000 years. This is how we get a very well-known cycle of consciousness that the ancients knew about. Without the moon, we don't have that anymore. So the ancients that talk about the importance of the age of Aquarius, the age of all the Pisces and all these different astrological periods of time wouldn't exist without our moon. So this moon of ours is playing a massive role, not only in, of course, the obvious things like keeping our tidal locked, keeping everything relatively consistent with our water, not devastating coastal cities, which would be gone if we didn't have this, also affecting our seasons, of course, and of course also women's menstrual cycles as well, as everyone knows. But beyond all of that, it's this very important cycle of consciousness, the age of the zodiac, the yugas, that this moon, this tilted axis of our planet, has to do with the it is affected by our moon. So our moon is unbelievably important to the survival of our species, but also apparently the rise and fall and the cyclical nature of our own consciousness here on this planet. So it's got a lot of incredible things going on that it's doing to our planet and to us specifically as a species. So,
Chris, yeah, I want to jump in here too. And another undisputed, common known anomaly about our moon is that it's so darn big.
yes,
It's so darn big. A lot of moons aren't that big, especially with a host body being as big in proportion. Like what is the moon? A third of the size of the Earth? Something like
basically.
that?
Yeah, it's huge.
It's huge.
It's the biggest in relation to its father, mother, whatever planet, like its respective planet. It's
Right.
the largest for
And
sure.
it's one of the largest bodies, I think, in our solar system. And it's here.
I
We
know.
look outside your window. It's right there. Look how big that thing is in the sky. We take it for granted. We often forget about the amazing, amazing things that are right here on this wild ride of planet Earth.
And we
So
only
go
and we
take a
only
look at that moon.
we only get to see that front side of that moon when you're taking Brandon's advice and going to take a look at it. We're only seeing that front facing side. What's going on the back? We literally don't have any way of knowing until we send probes out, like China did, I think a year and a half, 2 years ago, and got some
Yeah.
stuff from the dark side of the moon. And then that, of course, is shrouded in mystery. And
Were they sharing those any of the information or
I'm not as read up on that one yet.
right?
I
Well, I
really don't
think if they
know.
were, we would kind of it'd be out there. And if they
I'm
are sharing it, it's probably the same way that NASA and everyone else is sharing their information on the moon. Big question marks, right? We're talking about going to Mars these days. Everyone's like, Elon's going to go to Mars. Well, I mean, walk before you crawl would be the logical step. It's like when you want to ask your parents, I want to get a dog, and they're like, whoa, 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 let's get you a gerbil first.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to the moon before we go to Mars. Unless you want no accountability with Earth, then go to Mars by all means. But why are we not back at the moon? We went there in '69, so they say, and we haven't been back since what? Since the '70s?
70s.
Yeah, and it's all of a sudden we just stopped going. I mean, you're going to tell me that I have a smartphone in my pocket that's more powerful than the computers they used, but we somehow are like, well, I guess if we don't strap you to a giant rocket and blast you up there, I'm plumb out of ideas.
You
It's
know, it's weird, right?
it's not. It doesn't. The linear progression of technology has no credence to space travel to me. I'm like, look at how far we've come and look at how slow they're going. It's like start up the coal burning engine. We're going to take Titanic to the moon. That's what it feels like.
It's so primitive. I mean, you think about just rocket technology in general, it's barely advanced since what, the 50s. I know it has. I have a friend that works for SpaceX, and I know that I know that it has advanced, but it's still the same crap that you're exploding rockets with a sheet of metal trying to get it to these other I mean, it's so primitive. I'm sure
Okay,
any
Buzz, we're gonna strap you in to this giant freaking firecracker, okay?
basically.
And we're gonna light the bottom of it, and hopefully you don't explode. And if all goes well, it'll just keep pushing you up there, and hopefully we can burn other littler rockets to get you home. So yeah, that makes sense. Back in the 50s and the 60s, that made
Yes.
sense. Nowadays, you're gonna tell me that they don't got some 0 point energy kind of gravity manipulating, some sort of electromagnetic pulse style thing that makes it all look like a joke. I really think, and audience, let me know if you think the same way down in those comments below because we love your participation. But I really think that NASA and a lot of the space station, a lot of the space programs out there are a false flag now because once you go into space, if there's aliens or other things out there and they say hello, hey, how you doing, then you got to tell everyone. So it's best to keep us, the layman, out of it so that we can sit here on podcasts and speculate about it and have baby boomers tell us that we're crazy and all the other people below them say, well, I don't know if he's so crazy.
Yeah, and it's all really fascinating because we're eventually we'll do an episode on the secret space program because that's pretty fascinating in and of itself, the history and potential reality of a secret space program, which makes more sense because you've got a public front facing one like with NASA where you're literally given breadcrumbs at best. And then there's probably, like you said, more like a secretive program where there's so much more advanced technology, which actually makes more sense to me. Like you said,
It
the
makes
linear
so much sense.
progression just doesn't make sense.
Why would you want to bring people in? Like in a way, space is a military exploration as well,
Big
right? I
time.
mean, just think of it. Yeah, okay, so we're on Earth and we have terrestrial enemies, because we really should all get along. This is a beautiful garden we all live in, and the
Yes.
fact that we don't get along is crazy. But yeah, so you're thinking like let's say like we're like America, okay? You have a military and a dominant military in the world, and you want to keep that going. We're almost going into like a video game because sometimes to think like a country, you almost have to think ruthlessly like you're playing a game on your phone. And to take that dominance, you would be in space. You would have weaponized satellites. You would have the moon weaponized. You would be mining for rich resources. You wouldn't want to share any of that. And I think you could get away with it if you were in outer space.
Well,
Who's going to
that but
see you and
like
report about it?
that's why. Well, exactly. That's why I mean, that's why it makes no sense as to why they haven't gone back. Which, of course, they may very well have and have a presence there, or maybe they weren't allowed on the moon. I've heard that one too, which is really interesting.
Go
No,
on and get.
yeah,
Go back to your
and
go back to your planet.
well, think about this. So, David Adair, rocket scientist extraordinaire, he's the guy that the movie October Sky was based off of. Genius rocket scientist and engineer, and many other things. And he's a great interview. FYI, anyone watching any of his interviews on a show called Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia. Fantastic. And he has talked about at great length all the craziness about the moon. And one of the things he says is that, think about this. He's like, we have explored basically the equivalent of one very large shopping mall blueprint. Like the equivalent space
Oh
on
boy.
our moon is about the size that we have actually gone and taken samples and done significant research on. He's like, is about the size of a very large shopping mall at best. And he's like, that's all we have explored on this massive massive planetary object. And he's like, if they tell, when NASA's like, yeah, we saw everything we need to see, it's kind of like, we're good, we're done with the moon. He's
Everything you
like,
need to see. I
it's the
mean, what are
biggest
you
load of
talking about?
crock ever.
Do
It's
you
a
think there's got to be geologists out there who are salivating to
yeah.
study the moon? There's got to be, so many people who are in the study of geography. We want to know, is it dead? Is it extinguished? Is there a core? I mean, we kind of know, but do we really know? How do you really know unless you're there? Is there life on the moon? I know that sounds crazy to ask, but is there life on the moon? Is it, if it's not on the surface, is it underground? Are there pockets of atmosphere inside large caverns inside the moon? I want to know this. What is on the backside of the moon? And yeah,
Well,
why are we not
let's
back there?
let's get into it. So we've got a quick little video we're going to show you guys here on many, many more things that we have discovered about our moon. This one is how it rings like a bell. So to kind of get into what you're saying, Brandon, what is inside this moon? Well, this seismographic test that we have done on the moon tells and speaks volumes, and it's interesting that it does not get mentioned very much because it only compels you to think, well, what the thoughts that we're basically thinking on this show. So let's take a look and a listen to a very, very quick excerpt from the history show Unexplained, narrated by Canadian William Shatner. And let's take a look and listen here. There you go.
Sent its lunar module ascent stage hurtling into the moon. It hit.
I'm gonna back that up a second here.
Module, which they no longer needed, crashing into the moon.
When Apollo 12 sent its lunar module ascent stage hurtling into the moon, it hit. And the scientists on Earth saw the seismic data. But it didn't do what anyone was expecting. The signal seemed to be going back and forth inside the moon, almost like it was a bell that was ringing. And it went on for an hour, and no one has been able to understand why.
So I'm stopping that there just to be safe on our channel here. And thank you. Yeah. So that one rang like for 1 hour. They did a separate test after that rang for 3.5 to 4 hours or something
Didn't
like
they
that.
like nuke the moon or something? Wasn't
I've
it
I've
basically
heard
like a large bomb?
so I've heard that one. And that is we're not sure on that one. And if anyone watching this is, please let us know in the comments.
Well, yeah, I don't think you'd want to admit to it. We're gonna nuke the moon.
Yeah, I've heard all kinds of stuff about that. I've heard them shooting smaller missiles into it as well. But the most common one that's quite for sure is the fact that they just crashed one of their like rovers or whatever, or orbiting,
And it rang.
and it rang like a bell. And they had seismographic tech on the moon when they were recording this. So this isn't just, again, a story. This was recorded seismographic information. So it rang like a bell. How does a planetary body ring like a bell? That's a whole other episode we could go into at that. I'm just going to gloss over it for today, but let's be real. It's got to have a hollowness to it.
Right.
There has to be cavities, major cavities, to make it ring, to make it resonate. It cannot be thick, and it can't really have a molten core like they say it does and all this thick rock around it. It can't.
Do they think it has a molten core?
I've heard that theory too. Scientists out there, please don't get mad at me if I got that one wrong.
Core, then you'd assume that it has active tectonic abilities, and thus like it would be alive. Like the planet is kind of as long as you have that burning core, there's room for life there.
Yeah, I may have been incorrect on that one, but I think where I got that is that it is because it came supposedly the main theory that mainstream still kind of clinging on to is this planetary body impact theory onto Earth, which
and
then
it's
created
a part of us.
Exactly.
Do you know how much of Earth that would be?
No, but I do have another video that we can get into about this. So let's take another look here. Dr. John Brandenburg talks a very little bit. I wish we could watch more again, but we're just being careful here with our YouTube copyright. So this one's interesting because Yeah, it goes into more of the detail. Why can't I pull it up here? Oh, it's because we're in full screen. It goes into the detail of not only, the impact theory that is the common theory, but it also goes into a bit of the mathematical improbabilities of that theory, I believe. So let's just take a look. Let's see how much we can risk here. I'll just start it maybe around here. So let's get it going, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I believe this is Dr. John Brandenburg who we'll be hearing here.
Gargantuan collision and coalesced to form the moon.
Now, they had to come up with a very bizarre theory for how the moon came into being, because all the conventional theories don't make any sense. The best theory of the moon's formation is phantasmagorically catastrophic collision of two things, at just the right angle to form this belt of debris that then formed the moon. But the moon, its exact size is such that it gives us total eclipses. Its disk exactly covers the sun. And the chances of that occurring are so literally astronomically small. It's very disturbing.
So once again, this is
That's a great point. If it was formed from a collision, then why is it so precise, right? Because out of chaos, you don't get precision. And just think of what the Earth, if you look at a a model of the Earth and you take away the ocean, you can kind of see that the Earth has gone through some stuff before. And as you can with the moon, it's craters and everything. I just don't buy, like he said, that it would be so precise that it would be a mirror image of the circumference of the sun at this distance. It would be deformed if it was made out of a deformity, out of a cataclysm, then it would be deformed.
100%. It would look more like our standard moons, which look like potatoes or very deformed rocks and planets. Like most moons are not anywhere close to spherical. Our moon isn't perfectly circular. It's a little bit more eggy-ish shaped, but it's pretty much a perfect circle when you're looking at it with the naked eye.
I think it needs to be said now too, Chris, that the Sumerians, they talked about the history of Earth becoming Earth, and that Earth was a fully water planet in between Mars and Jupiter, and it was called Tiamat. And I believe the moon was there with it, and its name was like Kingru, I believe, or Kingu. And yes, that this planet X, or Nibiru, the other planet of the solar system that is reported by these people, talks about it having a different rotation. So if we're all going this way around the sun, it's going the other way, and it's on this, as Zacharias Sitchin reports, it would be around 3,600 years of a cycle. Anyways, it talked about the first time this Nibiru came through the solar system, and it's one of its moons hit Earth on the first lap around the sun, and then it's coming back around, and they made direct contact. And with Tiamat, I suppose, it wasn't Earth at the time, and it extinguished life on the planet, and it caused a huge cataclysmic event between Mars and Jupiter, and actually pushed. It was because it's Nibiru was a much bigger planet, thing of almost like a gas giant, and it pushed Tiamat out of its way, out of its orbit, to the other side of Mars, where it now lives. But the moon stayed with it, they said. They said Kingu, the loyal companion, I believe is the words they used for it if you translate it right. Anyways, I only bring that up because they're talking about this cataclysmic event, right? Well, when there's a cataclysmic event of such great ferocity in the universe, there is evidence of it. And if you look in between Mars and Jupiter, and you are an investigative journalist who's like, okay, I read this weird ancient text talking about this cataclysm that happened in between Mars and Jupiter. Is there any evidence to support that? There's a debris field going around. It looks like a planet exploded between those two. And you explain the asteroid belt. I suppose you could just say that, there it is. But
well, the asteroid belt is also in the position. Our planets are very symmetrically placed throughout our solar system, and where you would expect to see a planet, but instead there's no planet. There's the asteroid belt. It's right where a planet would be, given the logical nature and layout of our solar system. So let's get right into a beautiful segue that you naturally kind of put there, Brandon, which is
Yes,
have
I
the
will say I don't know if the Sumerians talked about the moon being artificial, but
well, but we do have ancient accounts of there being no moon and then two moons and then one moon. And that sounds crazy, but it is actually documented in different things. So I was able to pull up
yeah,
some
go
of these
on.
different documents. So let's just start off. We got Aristotle. He wrote that Arcadia in Greece, before being annihilated by the Hellenes, or the Hellenes, had a population of Pelasgians, and that these Aborigines occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the earth. For this reason, they were called Procelines. And I'm probably mispronouncing that, but basically, in this excerpt from, I'm not sure, a Greek text of some kind, Aristotle is writing about a type of people. And in passing, as if this is maybe more common knowledge in ancient times, he says that they were in the land, that they are in this land already before there was a moon in the sky above Earth. So in a way, it's just as we do in history, we use these kind of landmarks throughout history, like before the pyramids or whatever, even though we don't really know when the hell that was. We've got another account. So we've got Apollonius of Rhodes, which I may be going to soon in Greece. We'll see. He mentioned when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens, before the Danae and the Deucalion races came into existence, and only the Arcadians lived, of whom it is said that they dwelt on mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. That's in his. There's a Roman, Plutarch wrote in the Roman Questions. There were Arcadians of Evanders following, the so-called pre-lunar people. He calls literally in this Roman text a group of people the pre-lunar people. They also, again, they mention like these people possessed this land before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon. Like they keep using these references, older than the moon, older than the moon. It's crazy. And you've got you also have in, I think it's in the Bible, in Job 25:5, the grandeur of the Lord, who, quote, makes peace in the heights, end quote, is praised, and the time is mentioned for this particular person here. There, it's mentioned, quote, before there was a moon and it did not shine. This is from the Bible. Also in Psalm 72:5, it says, thou wast feared since the time of the sun and before the time of the moon, in generation of generations. So, there's more, but I'll leave it at that because I'm just reading this off of a list, and there's more on this list. And I've double checked some of these, and these have come up quite a few times. So especially the ancient Greek texts are absolutely mentioning this. So the ancients knew a time before there was a moon. So now we have to ask the question: okay, is this an artificial moon? Is this a hollow moon? When did this moon arrive? And were humans even on Earth before this moon arrived? And it seems like absolutely that was the case because of these ancient texts. So what does that mean? I honestly don't even really know. It just means that our Earth was completely different not too long ago, before the moon was brought here. Brought by who? Great question. Lots
Darth
of
Vader.
Yeah, clearly, right? Like we don't, the Empire, I don't know. So before we wrap this up, this episode up, I do have a couple. I have I think two more things I'm going to try to squeeze in here before we wrap this one up. So there's this interesting, because we got a lot more to talk about on this subject, and might have to do a second episode on this because we're not even going to get into the anomalies found on the surface of the moon. So I'll tease that today. That's a huge part of this also, of is this moon artificial? Well, I don't think it has to do with it being artificial, but there's definitely anomalies on that surface, ruins, perhaps entrance ways into bases, and even standing structures that are very curious on this moon that we can look at in a future episode. But I want to take a look at a really weird video I found that might be evidence to support that the moon is also projecting a hologram for us to see. And I'm saying a hologram of the moon itself. And so maybe what we're seeing from the surface of the planet and even looking up at with telescopes isn't exactly what's happening if they're projecting some kind of a, I don't know, hologram. Let's take a look at this video and see why I'm even saying this right now.
All right, welcome to the Crow Discovery Project. Again, this is the 2012 lunar wave footage, the best example of the lunar wave that we have, and I'm going to show you some things that sharp-eyed followers have spotted long, long ago and that I have talked about, but I have never taken the time to carefully illustrate. And what I'm going to show you here means an awful lot, but I'm also going to show the pulses that happen in the lower left limb of the moon. So watch the lower left there, and I'm just going to run a straight slowed down view, 30%. If you've got sharp eyes, you'll see what we detected on a 60-inch monitor. Now look inside the circle. There's a pulse that goes from lower left to upper right, and in the next circle, the yellow one, there's a lateral sweep that goes from left to right straight across the screen. And this is all going on as the wave is starting at the bottom. So now look at the pulses backwards and forwards. That's backwards. This is forwards, coming from the lower left limb of the moon. You can see the pulses now that I've put filters on them, how they have a curved aspect to them. And if you've got sharp eyes, you'll see the sweep up above. Now what I'm going to show you now, we have talked about, and many sharp-eyed viewers have known that this was an important thing about this clip for a long time. Here comes the wave. Look at the dark underlined crater in the center of your screen. Watch how it's displaced, almost like you're looking through water. There goes the wave backwards, forwards, the wave hits the crater, displaces. This wave is displacing, as if you were looking through water, the entire image of the moon.
Yeah. So I got this off of Michael Tellinger's website where he's talking about the moon being a holographic maybe projection, or it's still this real object but it has a hologram around it, so it's like, oh, it's an empty moon, and who knows what's underneath this real hologram. uh, I don't know any of this. Is just came across this one recently, but I thought it was pretty interesting.
I wonder, I know that people who adhere to the flat earth talk about the moon being made of plasma. And I wonder if that would fuel them. I think my video is lagging, by the way. I do apologize to anyone if my sync is off.
That's all good. You know, it's crazy, Brandon. I came across a interview on NBC or something from the 60s, I want to say the 1960s. And there was a physicist, a scientist, who I couldn't get much information on after. It was kind of mysterious. And he was talking about the moon being plasma as well. It's something to consider. All we know about today in our episode is, is the moon artificial? That's the real question. I would say it's at the very least worth looking into more and getting more tests. Like, why does it ring like a bell? Why is it mathematically perfect in terms of its perspective from planet Earth and the sun? It's the perfect distance. Why is it so? One thing we didn't get into today are the craters on that moon are very flat, meaning if a massive body is going in and smashing into an Earth-like object, it's going to create a much deeper cavity, a much deeper crater, and the craters are not very deep on the moon. It's like they can go only so deep and then hit something real hard, maybe metallic, maybe who knows what kind of structure they've got inside this device. This I don't know. Is it a lunar observational station of some kind? I don't know. So let us know in the comments, everybody, what you guys think this is. There's so many more anomalies that we didn't even get into, and we'll have to save that for another episode because there's just so many questions when it comes to our moon.
Yeah, we are about out of time, everyone. So we're just going to take this time now to thank you so much. Thank you so much for our host here, Chris Noble. Thanks for bringing another great action-packed bit of content for us and our listeners. If you want to check out more of Chris, you can become a community member of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed for 33 cents a day. Like, subscribe, check out Chris Noble on Spotify. He has very, very, very interesting, almost spiritual music going to using the math of the universe there, which is always so cool to hear. And to all of you guys, let us know below what you think. Is the moon fake? Is it real? Is it anomaly? Is it spiritual? Maybe it's God created. I don't know. And I want to get to the bottom of it, and I want to get there with you. So thank you so much, everyone. Stay kind, stay curious. Chris, last thoughts?
Thank you, everyone, for watching, and can't wait to see you on another episode of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. Until next time.
Ciao for now.